once we started doing old Cas, then it became tricky. And I think that's kind of become the defining road for the Grasshopper Adventure Series. And I think in some ways for the development of the gravel bike, that particular route.
That was this week's guest, Miguel Crawford, talking about the Grasshopper Adventure Series and the old Cas route and the influence it's had on the sport. The Grasshopper Adventure Series has been going on for 20 years, which is an amazing accomplishment by Miguel and his team. I was stoked to talk to Miguel and learn more about how the event got started 20 years ago, about what kind of equipment they were riding along the way, how that equipment's evolved, and what the future holds for the Grasshopper Adventure Series. So with that, let's take it away. Hey, Miguel, thanks for joining us on the podcast this week.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I always like to start off by finding a little bit about people's cycling background. So how did cycling come into your life?
Well, I grew up playing multiple team sports. I grew up playing soccer and basketball and baseball, and was a competitive, athlete. I graduated high school in '88, and I'd always been interested in bikes. My drafting teacher in junior high was a bike tourer, so I remember from extra credit drawing some touring bikes. When it was time to get a bike in high school, it was 1988, and I'd always wanted to get a road bike. And my sister at the time said, "Hey, these guys in Santa Rosa are doing this cool thing called mountain biking." I said, "Oh, that sounds even better." And so I bought a used Stumpjumper in 1988, and the timing was perfect in terms of my personal life, looking for something challenging and exploratory, and also trying to find a sport that didn't require me to be involved in a team. And pretty much it's been about bikes since then.
Right on. And had you always stayed on the mountain bike side, or did you pick up road riding along the way?
Well, that's a good question. So when I got my mountain bike, I went to school at Humboldt State, and it was my transportation. So I'd have slicks on, and then I'd put knobbies on. I was back and forth. I'd always wanted an additional second bike, couldn't afford it. And when I moved back to Sonoma County, where I grew up in Sevastopol, I eventually picked up a used road bike from a friend. The folks I started riding mountain bikes rode road bikes. They weren't roadies. At that time, we kind of saw people being in one camp or another. But for me, it was just as fun to begin riding a road bike. So that was probably in '92. I started riding road bikes.
Yeah, it is interesting how we do tend to designate ourselves in one camp or the other. I've always had equal footing, I feel like, on the road and the mountain. That's why gravel is so interesting to me, because it's drawing from both sides of the sport.
Yeah, and so it didn't take me long to realize that my love for cycling and then my past experience with competition, went well together. So I started competing in mountain bikes. And then my group of friends, out of Occidental, which is where I was living, rode bikes as well. And so the roads in West County, though, as you may or may not have seen, you may as well be on a mountain bike. So it's extremely challenging. It's not as if I was in UC Davis or in the flat plains and whatever. So to me, it really was. It didn't seem like that different of an experience. But my true love is mountain biking. Has always been, still is. It's more thrilling to be out there where there's no cars and be on the edge of the world on a little trail. That's just what I love the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that drives a lot of us, just the sort of sense of adventure and getting away from it all. So I'm excited to talk to you about the Grasshopper series. Literally every single person I've had on the podcast has referenced the Grasshopper Adventure series as one of one of the many events in the series that they love to go up and do. It's 20 years old, which is unbelievable to me when I found out about it when you made the announcement at Old Cas this year. Can you tell us about the origins of the event and how it got started and what it was like back then?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for one, there wasn't the internet, right? And there wasn't that web platform. You didn't have, Wix or whatever. You couldn't spend a half an hour and create a web page and have an event. And basically, as a teacher, I was sitting at my desk. So I was racing on the weekends and training and teaching. And I've been a teacher for 23 years right now. And so it's been a good balance between my racing and putting on these events and then what I do as an educator. And so I remember also before kids, so weekend to weekend, so midweek, I'd be thinking about my rides. I think the epiphany for me was after driving down to Pine Flat, which is a beautiful area, but I think we spent 6 hours of driving and then a hotel, and we went to go race, and I had a bad day and ended up in the ER in Fresno behind bulletproof glass, and it turns out I had a kidney stone, and it was a crappy day and a lot of money. And I got back to my place in Occidental. I thought, I don't want to drive. I don't want to be in the hotels. I don't want to spend money. And I also didn't want the experience of what happens in road races. If you're not at the sharp end of the field, the whole rest of the group just rides neutral. And for me, it was training. And so that sort of, mountain biking, it's always hard. And so I thought, well, what if we start from where we live so I don't have to drive. We invite the people who it's competitive, and we'll have just an agreement that there's no waiting. There's going to be no aid and no support, and we'll just see how it goes. And my girlfriend at the time, my wife, would write the results down at the end, and we'd go drink beer and eat pizza. And, that's how it started.
Was there a specific route that kind of kicked it all off?
Well, everything started out of Occidental, which many of them do. The very first one included Willow Creek, but it didn't include Old Cas. It was Sweetwater, which we're doing this in a couple weeks, and then all the way out the river and up Willow Creek. So from the start, it was for me as a mountain biker to look for something that was interesting and fun and had dirt. So that's been a part of it all along.
Were the men and women who participated back then, were they riding mountain bikes or road bikes? What were they on mostly?
Well, it's interesting. So at that time, I'd say most people were on a road bike. So the folks so again, this is before internet, right? So I had to call people or mail something. So basically I knew some folks down in Santa Cruz. I knew Rick Hunter, and then in Santa Rosa there were some folks, and then Curtis English, I think later came from Napa area. So the Santa Cruz group, because of their background, were coming up on cyclocross bikes. And then us up here, we're all on 26-inch hardtails with skinny tires.
Right.
But the first couple ones that included roads, we were on road bikes. So we're also accustomed to riding road bikes with 25s or 28s, just like had done in many parts of the country. So that was primarily. Once we started doing Old Cas, then it became tricky. And I think that's kind of become the defining road for the Grasshopper Adventure Series. And I think in some ways for the development of the gravel bike, that particular route.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I was talking to someone the other day about my experience at Old Cas, which I've done it twice. One was about, I'd say 8 years ago on a cross bike with cantilever brakes. And then again this year on a quote unquote gravel bike with disc brakes, 650B size wheels, 1.9 tires. And it was like night and day. I enjoyed sort of every pedal stroke of it this year. Whereas I remember feeling in that first year that I was excited by the adventure. I loved the river crossing. I loved all the elements of the day, but I was just getting the crap kicked out of me all day.
Oh, yeah, right. The gravel bikes are crazy. I mean, the Diverge I'm on right now, it rides and descends better than my old mountain bike. I mean, I off-road, and on the road, it's got fantastic geometry. And so at the time, Ibis was also around, and now almost everyone is making a gravel bike, but there was some resistance. There was the idea of you have a road bike or you have a mountain bike or you have a cross bike, and the geometry and the slack angles and the aggressive angles in some of them. And then the high bottom bracket, it wasn't perfect, And I think what also added with the Grasshopper and Old Cas is when you add that competitive element, then people start to be concerned about what really works best. If you're just cruising and you're all on the same bike, it doesn't really matter. But since we were adding that carrot of who's the crusher for the year, people would take it seriously. Especially Glenn Font and Shane Brezhnin from Santa Rosa. Glenn's been such a gear freak forever, tweaking out on the details of tires and every single detail. So that's kind of added to it, as well as the tire manufacturing. I mean, that's been a fantastic change and improvement for all of us. There really weren't many choices back then.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I feel like when disc brakes started to sneak into the cyclocross scene, all of a sudden their eyes started opening as to what those cross bikes can do. And when the frame designers caught up a little bit and made a few tweaks for the kind of more adventure riding and less cyclocross racing, all of a sudden these bikes are just opening people's eyes to this gravel riding scene and a totally new type of riding.
Yeah, and it's putting us where we want it to be, which is off the road. I mean, all of us, contend with traffic, and no one likes to do that. So it's given people the chance to ride roads in their backyard that they may not have ridden when they had to squeak by on a road bike with 25 Cs and deal with flats, And so I understand the mass appeal. Yeah, it's fantastic. And the comfort as well. If you could run a 650B, I was running on my Void wheels with 47 WTBs, and I did a 4-day tour with Yuri Housewald a while back, and I think he was on set, on his Adams 700C with 35s, and just looking side by side, and I was like, damn, these wheels roll and tires just roll fantastically. So yeah, it really is coming down to wheels and tires these days.
Was there a particular point in the last 20 years where you started to see the equipment really caught up and the participation in the events just grew?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific year. It's been the last few years. I wish we had photographs of the first 8-10 years, because everyone was the variety of bikes that would come up. It was just super entertaining, and everyone just trying to make it work. I'd say in the last 3 years, pretty much everyone's showing up with a gravel bike, just kind of the norm. Something happened last year that was interesting. One of the folks who's been doing the hoppers, he said, yeah, I'm buying my first mountain bike. And I looked at him and I thought, what? And, it dawned on me that people that ride gravel, for some people, it's been around long enough that that's the only bike they know. And now they're discovering mountain biking and they're discovering road biking. So I think that's an interesting evolution. Whereas, for most of us rode mountain bikes and road bikes, and we got into gravel. So,
have you considered changing any of the routes given the new types of equipment that are available today, or is it staying pretty true to the original routes?
It's staying true. I think, we'll talk about later about the branching out to the Mendo event. For me, the hoppers have been about Sonoma County and about West County and about the community of people. And so it's about riding where we live. The world and the country is a big place, so you could go someplace and you could draw this perfect route. But if it's not where you live and it's not part of the people who are there supporting your event, it doesn't really make sense. And so all these are where we are. So it's also been a big balancing act of making the courses safe and creative and interesting and challenging, and also dealing with the fact that they're on open roads. So that's something I've always taken very seriously. And they've morphed over time to make sure that they're all mostly right-hand turns, for example. People may not have noticed that, but every time you make a left turn, you're crossing opposing traffic. So almost all of them go in a counterclockwise direction, right? In a clockwise direction. I think we've nailed a pretty sweet spot. King Ridge, for example, that one, which has several sections of dirt now, that kind of sums up, the trickster role that I'd like to play. I think most people in this area had been riding here 15, 20 years or longer and had never done King Ridge in that direction. I think even adventurers are creatures of habit sometime. And so I think that one's perfect. And then I'm looking at doing some other explorations of some areas. Got a couple secrets, and I can fill you in on those when plans get near.
That would be great. And you alluded to the Mendo hopper. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Yeah,
sure. Well, myself, like many others who are huge aficionados of fans, can lose huge amount of times now that we have Google Maps and Google Earth, and I'm no different. So I have, besides my paper gazetteers, I have quite a collection of routes. And so for me, Sonoma County, Mendocino County, and Humboldt County are the areas that I've really considered home since I was a kid. I've been looking at changing the format so that we could have a 2-day event. And I looked at possibilities of 2 days out of one place. So this event's going to be 2 days, but with camping in the middle. So instead of people driving and parking and doing their event and splitting, we're going to all be together at McCarricker Campground in Fort Bragg. So we'll bring stuff out there for people. It'll be 2 days of about 75 miles each, and about each of the days will be half gravel. So I think it's just going to be a fantastic 2 days. When you get into Mendocino County, Humboldt County, it's not hard to find a loop, but to find something about that length that's a loop, single loop, is tough. I think when I was looking at doing it as all one loop, we were looking like 135 miles and 15,000 feet of climbing or something, and decreases the number of people that would be interested, as well as the logistics of keeping track of people. So I think this is going to be a good one. Well, it gives people a chance to do roads you may see on a map, but it just wouldn't make sense. And I feel like that's, ever since I've been riding, and whether it's doing mountain bike trips in Downeyville or Tahoe or Moab or Crested Butte, I've always been the one to look at the map, oh my God, where could we go? Look at this. And for the most part, people trusted me to put together things that were interesting. And I still feel like I'm, playing that role, even though it's become more popular for people to go out on their own. I like hosting these events and saying, hey, check out this.
I do feel like it's a big driver for the community, just like it was back in the early mountain bike days. We all used to sign up for events just to go try new terrain and have someone map it out for us. And I think gravel riders are really seeking out those kind of adventures, whether it's a few hours from home or many hours from home. We all want to try new things.
Absolutely, and I think I'm very much not a little west centric, where we're by so much open space and mountains, and there you are in Marin and north of San Francisco and in this area. But if you think about the amount of people who live east of the Rockies, people want to get out of the cities, or people who live in big cities, they want to get out. And in those areas, there are tons of gravel roads. And I think for the most part, events are happening organically where people live and say, hey, let's do this. So that's cool to see.
I was always curious about your sort of thought process. Do you consider the Grasshopper series races or something else?
That's a good question. I've often said they're not races, but they're harder. It's kind of gone back and forth. I really want it to be something for everyone. And I think that they're unique in that you have Kate Courtney and Ted King and Jeff Kabush and Levi and some of the top, local pros, Lawrence Ten Dam out. And then you have people who finish twice as long later. But I think one thing about cycling these type of events is there's that personal challenge. What it isn't as a race, and this was very intentional by me when I started these, is people ride differently when you say it's a race. And people will make decisions, in my opinion, that are in their best interest for the group. So I'm really careful about calling it a race. As you know, there's a point series and standing and a podium. But basically every Wednesday afternoon ride all around the country, people have, they're as much a race as the Grasshopper. So they are competitive. They were always meant as competitive training events. It's gone back and forth in terms of the permitting and insurance. And also the logistics of actually closing down an event like you would Tour California. It's not possible in this area. So those are a couple of reasons why it is purposely a little bit not clear as to what it is.
Now, I personally I love how it's called the Adventure Series, and I love, in my mind, going out there and just having an adventure. And I do think it's cool, like up front, that it's local pros that are killing it. But for me, the race is in the middle of the pack somewhere, and I'm all about just enjoying the day out there. And I have to say that each of the Grasshoppers I've done has always just been a good day out, and when you get to the finish line, it's even better.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've had the experience. So my oldest kids are 15 and 12, and I have a 2-year-old. So there was at least 1 year where literally every ride for 5 months was just a Grasshopper. I went from Grasshopper to Grasshopper, and I did them all. And I had the experience of riding initially to try and win them, and then riding in the top 10, and then being way in the back. So to be in this group of field, and they became my peers. Of every single person was giving it as much as when we were in the top 10, and it was kind of a light bulb moment. And they were having that same experience as the person who was 45 minutes faster. And I thought that's beautiful, and the sense of accomplishment and achievement. And a lot of folks don't see each other all year, and they'll come out and do a hopper, and 20 miles into it, they're with someone. They're like, hey, Tony, hey, Kent, what are you doing? Because the fitness is the ultimate equalizer. And, and I think that's one of the beauties as the event's gotten larger in terms of numbers, that it's more likely that you're going to end up with similar people, whether it's at Old Kaz or it's at King Ridge or it's at Super Sweetwater. And I always hear people telling good stories about that,
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that if you call it a race, and many of the races we've done on mountain bikes or road bikes, when you're off the back, when you're middle of the pack, you're rarely like looking over and having a laugh with someone. There's still that weird race intensity that I think part of it's being in the dirt, part of it's riding these gravel bikes, part of it's just these cool events. You just look over and you have a good time. You're not trying to crush the guy next to you for 107th place.
Exactly. And I one of the things I used to openly joke about when I started this is friends who would do Old Kaz and they wouldn't do the other. And I'm going to Visalia. I want to get my upgrade points from my 5 to my 4. I'm like, okay, whatever. So we coined this the Pro Fun Tour, so your Pro Fun Tour upgrade points. And that's rung true to a lot of people when you look at the movement of gravel and of the type of competition. It's like, I think it is important to acknowledge the top people and to strive for that, but I also don't believe in the minutia of all the age group categories and ability categories so that everyone gets a medal. I don't think that's the experience that we're all looking for, and I think that's kind of the direction that it was for a while. It may evolve back into some level. I don't know. There's not like an overall governing body for all these events that are popping up, and that's a good thing. So,
yeah, I think it's interesting in the gravel riding community, and we've talked about it a little bit before on other episodes, is it seems like there's a couple different directions the way these events are going. There's the kind of 4 to 6 hour events, and then there's more of the ultra endurance events that are out there, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. And chances are it won't shake out. I think there's room for all types of events, for different types of adventures.
I agree, and for different people, and for different reasons, and for different periods of their life as well. For me, my demographic, I'm almost 50 now, and I still like to be fit and compete. So to show up and race local pro doesn't make sense. I'm last or second to last, or I compare my times. But to be able to compete in the 40 to 49 category, there's some super fit guys. We had 150 guys show up at Old Cas. So there was no podium, but that group of 150, or the top 25 people into 40 or 49, they know who those people are and they know where they rank. And so you're allowed to be competitive without that being the ultimate motivator, So I think that's a beautiful thing in sport in general. And I think it's important to cultivate that in our events and in the Grasshoppers. And, that's important to me.
So is there one event that stands out as your personal favorite?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I just wrote a little piece, though I'm not quite the blogger, but on Facebook, it feels to me right now, the Sweetwater, this one coming up, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's just weird. It's like 4 of our biggest climbs. It's basically a road ride, but then you throw Old Cas in the middle, which is gravel. So it's what I call a birthday, and they're like, oh shit, it's Mig's birthday, because you can't say no and you got to go do it. So we do a huge road ride, but then we do Old Cas in the middle, which means, it's crazy to just ride a gravel bike because you only have that, 8-10 mile section of gravel. But if you just ride your road bike, then it's kind of tricky. And then the fact that we go from the river valley, we do Old Cas, we have the creek crossing, we climb to the top of Fort Ross with the Myers Grade descent, which on a clear day has got to be one of the best descents in the world. And it finishes with the Coleman Valley climb. But truly the best Grasshopper for me is the one that I just most recently did. They're all loops that are just, they're all fantastic, and they're all a little bit different.
And are there some memories over the last 20 years that stand out to you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. This year, pulling off Old Cas successfully is a big memory. The size of things and just the frenetic energy around it, I feel satisfied about that. I'd say some of the most inclement weather days stand out the most. We had a couple of those last year. I'd say probably the most striking weather one was, I can't remember the year, but there was a year where everything was flooded in Tamales area, and we were doing Chileno Valley. And in that area, it's interesting because you oftentimes check the rain, but in that area, you have to check the tide tables because the creeks and Highway 1 flood based upon high tide. And so when we rolled out towards Valley Ford, this is when we went down Freestone Valley Ford Road into Franklin School, the Valley Ford cutoff was fine, but it didn't rain that much today, but the tides went up. So by the end of the day, and we came through. No, that's not true. It was flooded. Actually, I remember that. There was a Volkswagen bus that was stalled. I think Rick Hunter was there. So it was about the height of the middle part of your down tube at the start of the day. And then at the finishing day, myself and Devin Vigas and a few others were coming through Valley Ford. And I remember him falling over, and he actually completely submerged. And this was on a paved road. So we were riding through a flood. And then the sprint, which is like 6 of us, entailed going up the Freestone Valley Ford cutoff. And when that floods, it actually has a current. And so the road's the size of a small county road, but you had to literally ride right in the middle, because if you fell in the ditch, it's 8-10 feet deep. So that one, just because of the miraculousness of us pulling it off, really, really stands out to me. I should have made notes. It's been 20 years of 5 hoppers a year. That's a lot of hoppers.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think another story is one of the cold days on King Ridge for one of my best friends, Emil Lewis, who was doing pretty well. He was ahead of me, actually. I rolled into Jenner to get some food. It's one of those days when it was so cold and you had to stop because we didn't have have food or drinks there. And he was pulled over at the market. Instead of getting like coffee and a Snickers or whatever, he was buying a huge piece of smoked salmon. Like all he could think about was to buy the first thing he saw. And there's a guy standing there. So I think he spent $8-10 of smoked salmon on the side of the road. But that's symbolic of people just being completely empty and out there.
Yeah, and I mean it's why people talk about it for 3 or 4 days after every grasshopper. Just these memories of the adventure of being out there. I think that's a good way to sum it up.
Yeah, and we didn't used to have any water or support for people, so that made it a little extra challenging. I feel fine offering Osmo and goo and sponsors product and nutrition. I feel like that's still not cheating. Plus having cold beer for people up at the top, nobody minds that too much.
I think everybody appreciates it a lot.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, 20 years, that's so awesome. I mean, I can't express enough how cool that is. I think a lot of people would love to know, do you have any tips for first-time event organizers to help them kind of pull off something successfully?
Oh, I'm a funny guy to ask that, as I don't have a business degree. It happened totally organically. I'm doing it where you live and with the people that are core is really important. Obviously, from a business point of view, there's other things you need to look at. But I think just starting on doing a route that's fun to ride and focusing on that, looking out after people just enough so that they're safe and covering your butt, but make it, a little bit edgy, I think is important in this type of event. Putting it on in a way that's not going to create conflict with other users in your area, whether it's hikers or equestrians or people on the road. I think that's something that we always have to be mindful of when we look to run 100, 200, 300 cyclists out there.
Yeah, it seems like you guys have done a great job of embracing the small community of Occidental in a way that, as you said, 600 people can come into town and try not to disrupt things too much while still bringing economic value to the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal of doing that, exactly. And pretty much, I mean, we took over the town, and hopefully they see it as a plus. So, it's not business as usual. I know people love and look forward to coming to that town. And I think, picking a destination that you can have a relationship with, that is important. I'm really looking forward to doing this one again in Mendocino, where it's kind of spreading out and connecting with different people I know up in that way. Giving people a chance to, again, I think one of the things, once you do an event a few times, it's kind of a known thing and a known factor, although there's always like, how fast can you do it? This Mendocino one, there's certain pieces when you look at the maps that it's like, you're out there. When you're riding Sherwood Road, you have 35 miles of dirt from the ridge on Wilts to the coast, So both sections of that gives you this really sense of exploration. And so that's important to me. And the next phase is continuing to have things that have that unknown factor and a little bit step outside of the comfort zone.
Do you see more 2-day events coming into the Grasshopper series?
I don't know. I think this event's going to be unique and stand on its own. I think there's been a lot of interest in it. I think after the first year, the report back will be that was a pretty amazing experience and be able to end and camp right on the ocean. People aren't quite that accustomed to leaving their things. And 2-day events, was something else interesting. There's something in October that might be going on, and the second day wouldn't be necessarily a big ride. I think back-to-back big days and then travel is a little bit taxing. So it's something a little bit more social or educational or cultural on the second day, and time to unwind and just be together, and a first day of big riding. But got some ideas.
Nice.
Hey, but why not a week? Why not a week long, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If we can all find the time off from our families, a week in the gravel wouldn't be a bad thing. Yeah.
Right. See, I think that's been the key of the NorCal cycling community with this stuff as well. That I really appreciate. As people carve out the time in their daily lives to make time for themselves. To do what they love and keep their passion going. I think that all makes us better people with our relationships and our families and our work. And really, that's where it comes from for me. As the teacher, it's like giving us something, because we all play bigger roles, more important roles outside of the cycling. And to me, if it's all about biking, it's a little bit too narrow. I think it's a vehicle for us to be in the world. And the Northern California cycling community, just impressed with the men and women who just like do so much for each other and for the community, and while at the same time finding times to get out and shred, and that speaks volumes to the people here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a pretty natural point to finish our conversation today. I think it sounds like there's a really cool future ahead for the Grasshopper Adventure Series, and a couple new tricks up your sleeve. And obviously, if anybody hasn't been out to one of the events, I encourage you to get out there. They're all great, and that part of California is beautiful.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And let me not forget to give a plug for Lake Sonoma. It's like 27 miles of just ripping, undulating single track. It's like a flow trail. And the Hoppers is about being able to shred on every sled, so you've got your cross bike, your mountain bike, and your road bike.
It's a good place to start. Miguel, where's the best place to find information on the series?
Oh, our webpage is the best, grasshopperadventureseries.com. Follow us on Instagram, Grasshopper Adventure Series. Our Facebook page, I tried to keep things active there as a place for people to gather information, but our website's got everything you need to know.
I'll make sure to have everything in the show notes on that, and I really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Hey, my pleasure.
So that was great talking to Miguel this week. The Grasshopper Adventure Series has meant so much to Northern California and to the gravel cycling community. I hope would-be event organizers learned a few tips from Miguel about how to put on a great, long-standing event and how to integrate into a local community. And in some late-breaking news, I just learned that the Marin Museum of Bicycling in Fairfax is interviewing Miguel on April 26th. I'll put the link to the event in the show notes, but I want to encourage everybody to go out and see Miguel in person and see some of the great images he's captured over the years hosting the Grasshopper series. As always, thanks for listening. If you have any feedback, you can hit us on Instagram at The Gravel Ride. Shoot me a note at craig@thegravelride.bike. And also don't forget to share, rate, and review this podcast to help us get found. Until next time, get out there and get some adventure, and we'll see you soon.